The advantage of being armed with the Americans possess over the people of almost every other nation forms a barrier against the enterprises of ambition, a barrier against tyranny and oppression by a ruling class.
This sounds like a normal Second Amendment speech. Then Massie turns this into a warning about how freedom is actually lost.
I got my first firearm when I was 12 years old from my father, and with that I learned the responsibility and the rights that come with owning a firearm. I formed the Second Amendment Caucus about a decade ago and have been using that venue to bring in people like Alan Gura, the lawyer who was responsible for arguing the Heller case and also the McDonald case, and he won both of those cases in the Supreme Court. In fact, we've had Dick Heller in our caucus, and we've had some of those brave men who have stopped mass public shootings. And it's been a great venue for teaching myself and others more about the Second Amendment. In keeping with the committee's request, I've prepared a speech, but I'll only deliver part of that. And then with your indulgence, I'd like to talk about some legislation that I think is important that's sitting in the House. The simple and direct language of our Constitution is clear. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There are no qualifiers on who may keep arms, what types of arms they may keep, or for what purposes. And it certainly doesn't say that the right to bear arms is about trivial matters like deer hunting or skeet shooting. The Second Amendment exists for one clear reason: defense. For the defense of one's home, one's family, and one's community. For the defense of liberty and safety, not only from a lone assailant, but from the whole of tyrannical government. That is why we have the Second Amendment. Our founders understood the greatest risks to liberty are not always found outside a nation's borders.
Absolutely.
Even though we go looking for fights abroad sometimes too frequently. But oftentimes from within, when a corrupt and dangerous few grow too ambitious and attempt to subjugate the masses. And when such tyranny arises, snakes prefer the path of least resistance. They prefer a population that is vulnerable. And as George Mason reminded us in 1788, to disarm the people is the best and most effectual way to enslave them. History's riddled with oppressive states that stripped and abused their own people to keep riches for the assaulting cabal. And in every instance, before those snakes bit, they first took away the guns. Whether it was Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Castro, or Chavez, gun confiscations and restrictions came first, then the infringement of all the other liberties. And in many cases, millions were killed by their own governments. It's not by the grace that America has averted similar atrocities. It's because of our Constitution's design. As Madison wrote in Federalist 46, the advantage of being armed with the Americans possess over the people of almost every other nation forms a barrier against the enterprises of ambition, a barrier against tyranny and oppression by a ruling class. To this point, I think it's incumbent upon us to advance legislation that will protect the Second Amendment here. We've sworn an oath to the Constitution to protect it from enemies from within and abroad. 4 pieces of legislation that I've sponsored in the House that I want to talk about today. One is to repeal the Gun-Free School Zone Act. 94% of mass public shootings happen in gun-free zones. And so we shouldn't be advertising as the default that our children are sitting ducks, that are unprotected. In the states and school zones where they have allowed the carrying of firearms, there have been no such catastrophes. The other bill that's easy to explain is a bill to allow 18 to 21-year-olds to buy handguns from a federally licensed dealer.
Right,
I think it's somewhat ridiculous that you can be conscripted to serve your country in a war. You can be 18, 19, or 20 and forced into service to fight for your country, but you can't defend your own family with a handgun that you bought at a licensed dealer. So we should repeal this federal restriction. A piece of legislation that's coming up in the House next month, which I think is very important, is to report some of the data that we collect in the NICS database. When you go to buy a gun, you fill out a form 4473. It's that gold form. And they collect data on there that they never report. And what we've discovered through my friend John Lott, who's an economist and a statistician and an author, is that there's inherent racism in the NICS background check system. Because it's sloppy and they check only phonetically similar names, when you go to purchase a gun, you can be deprived of purchasing that gun. And the appeals process can get messy to prove you're not the same person that they think is the person who's prohibited. Right. It turns out if you're a Black American or Hispanic, you're far more likely to share a name phonetically with somebody who's a prohibited person who's been convicted of a crime of a year that has a punishment of a year or more.
There are a couple of things that I definitely fully agree with him on here, but then there are some other things that are just standing out to me as I don't know, guys, the more guns that are kind of in the area, the less crime generally tends to happen, specifically if they're legal gun owners. I'm not referring to going through the ghetto at 4 o'clock in the morning and expecting no type of crime. I'm not talking about that. The only thing that I'm weary about here, at least, is more firearms in the region of school. I do get the logic here. If you are advertising that this is a gun-free zone, right, then of course people, specifically if you are one of those absolute invalids, yes, you're most likely going to go to that area because that area, factually, has no one to protect anyone here. It kind of reminds me the armed teacher type of argument here. If we do know how our education system is absolutely going, kind of large scale, are you sure you want those people armed? Those people. The ones that teach the blue hairs.
You're probably twice as likely, if you're Hispanic, to be falsely denied the purchase of a handgun, and 3 times as likely, if you're Black, to be denied the purchase of a gun at a dealership, at a dealer. So this bill that's coming up in the House would just, and by the way, it's passed with unanimously in our Judiciary Committee. Democrats and Republicans have both voted for it. Simply requires the DOJ to publish that data, not of individuals, but in the aggregate of the denials by sex and also by race or ethnicity.
That's fair.
Finally, the bill that I'm most excited about is the National Constitutional Carry Act. And Senator Lee has that here in the Senate now, and some of you are sponsors of that. I thank you. Several years ago, there was legislation advanced to force reciprocity among the states for concealed carry permits. Now, that made sense at the time because in most of the states, you needed a permit to carry a firearm. But 29 states now recognize that the right to keep and bear arms should not require permission from your government to bear those arms. And so they have permitless carry. I've advanced a bill, the National Constitutional Carry Act, that would extend that to all 50 states and the territories. Now you may ask, well, does that violate the 10th Amendment? Are you infringing on state rights? Well, thanks to the McDonald case in 2010, which came 2 years after the Heller case. See, Heller was decided in DC, so it didn't impinge on the states. But the McDonald case versus Chicago incorporated the Second Amendment to the states. So the states are constrained by the Second Amendment. So no, it does not violate the 10th Amendment to tell the states that you must follow the right to keep and bear arms in the Second Amendment. So I'd love to see some action on that here in the Senate. With that, I'll return to my prepared remarks and close.
Okay.
When we look to our Constitution, remember it's a document by our people for the purpose of constraining our government, not the other way around. The Second Amendment is the ultimate check on our government. Any attack on those core tenets, whether it's the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, or the Fourth Amendment, or any other provision of our Constitution, is dangerous and wrong. And one does not need to look too far back in history to find examples of why. And I'll close with these words from Patrick Henry. Guard with jealous attention the public liberty. Suspect everyone who approaches the jewel. The great object is that every man be armed. Thank you very much for allowing me to testify today.
Oh, well, bro, do it again. Listen, I've never heard of this man in my entire life here, the entirety of my life here, okay? I think he needs to be on TV a little bit more here. He needs to go ahead and deliver his talking points a lot more here. There are a couple of things that stood out to me as, I don't know, in this day and age, with Gen Z and how they are and TikTok and the whole culture of the blue hairs and the septum pierced. I don't know. Everyone's a victim. I don't know, guys. I mean, listen, I get the idea of it. But I do think that certain areas probably don't. Listen, and I am an avid shooter. Okay. I go shooting all the time. The amount of bullets that I have thrown down range is absolutely disgusting. Just this year alone, and it's April. I have a weapons carry license, right? So I mean, I can carry not just firearms. Let's just say this year, right? I think that's how that works potentially. I don't know. I just carry firearms. But either way, I've also never been denied a firearm, right? But I guess it also does help that my name is not like stereotypically. Like a common name that is found in, high crime type of areas here, potentially, right? I mean, my name is Welsh, basically. No, it's Welsh. If you are promoting that there is an area with innocent people and no one has a firearm, you may be promoting the fact for those absolute idiots to come and do crazy terribleness to the innocents here. You could be promoting it. You could be in promotion of it, and that's where his logic is basically coming from in that there. But it reminds me of one thing here, okay? The idea of putting firearms into the hands of teachers, the same teachers that basically help raise your children to become blue hairs. I don't know, bro. Again, you're making more of these crazy people, bro, right? Then you put firearms in the hands of these absolute crazies. So for example, and the reason why I'm even going back to this year is because other than the parents, the teachers are the ones in your kids' lives, and your teachers are the ones teaching your kids all this absolute blue hair, septum piercing craziness. All right, so why would you give them? I don't know, bro. They're the source of it. Guys, I don't know. But obviously, the more legal gun owners there are in one area, the less likely things are actually going to happen gun-oriented, because why would you go to that area? Everyone is armed. Are you crazy? You're going to lose. Go to the areas where, I don't know, things are easy, right? That's kind of the vibe and energy here. And I also agree with him. Once you start realizing that guns are being taken away from you, you start to, 10, 20 years from there, they're coming after the people, bro. Who are the ones saying that we should no longer have access to firearms at the rate that we basically do? Listen to those. Who are those people? Okay. How do they act when people disagree with them mentally? Let's say they have one ideology, you have another ideology. You just so happen to be the person with the guns. The other people are like, I don't want them to have guns. Why don't you want me to have guns? We see how you guys deal with people who think differently. We see it happen all the time, guys. So now imagine if you make it so no one can have a firearm, and then the same people, the same unpatriotic people, the same people that absolutely do not represent our Constitution at all here. They in fact, it seems that they hate it whenever they speak here, guys. Those same people who have a problem with the First Amendment, unless they agree with it, with what you're saying here, are the same ones telling you shouldn't have guns anymore. I don't know, bro. Weird. I don't like it. No, thank you. Sorry. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't pass the smell test, my guys. All right. But listen, you guys all have an absolutely amazing day. Enjoy your day thoroughly. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. All right. Again, I definitely back the Second Amendment to the fullest here. I carry every day, period. The reason why the Second Amendment is perfect because it follows the First. If that makes any sense here. Dig deeper into that line there, guys. But either way, listen. Again, you guys all have an absolutely amazing day. If you guys are new here, please like and subscribe. And in the meantime, I'll go ahead and catch you guys later.